Hi, this is Roxy of Roxana Sinex Art, filming part 3 of How to Paint, Focus on Eyes. This is part 3 of a 4-part series for 3 Gear Studios. Afterwards, it'll be on Roxana Sinex Artist and 3 Gear Studios. Just as a quick summary of part 1 and part 2, part 1, we started with a blank canvas just with a drawing on the canvas, and then we filled in the darks and the lights just to help maintain the image and place things. Before I started, I had laid it out on a 3 section grid, like a tic-tac-toe board, but that defines the thirds both horizontally and vertically, help you with your composition, because those are good lines where you put major horizontals and verticals, and where they intersect is a great center of interest. That's just really basic composition. So what we have is this painting of this lady. She's my neighbor, and we are painting her eyes. I've done another couple paintings of eyes, and I plan to do a lot more because I just think eyes are fascinating. One thing is, if you can paint eyes, you can paint portraits, because a lot of the face actually shows in the eyes, and even the mouth shows in the eyes. We are going to, in this particular lesson, we are going to be developing what we had before. What we did, because in part 2, what we did is we went over the shapes and the forms. We added a lot of visual information. And I have a couple pictures. One of them's to scale, printed on paper where the resolution isn't as good. And one of them is on photo paper, but the size isn't exactly the same. The nice thing, you can't always get the size the same. Oh, I just put a picture in my paint. It's another picture I'm painting. But that's not recommended. Don't stick your pictures in your paint. But I also have my computer screen over here. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, let me move it over here. There it is down on the bottom part of the screen. And that one, what that does is it gives me better color, because I found my printer adds red, and then I tried to adjust it so it didn't add as much red, and it added too much yellow. And I guess if I really was to be an expert, then I would be able to adjust the color perfectly, but it's much easier just to put it on the computer screen. And the nice thing about the computer screen, if you want to, let's go back here and look for a second. I'm sure you're all aware that you should be able to make things much bigger. I don't know how well you can see that, but you can really zoom in on some of the areas and see the texture of the skin, and I can actually see the little veins and arteries, and her eyelashes much better, because this lady is not wearing makeup. And so her eyelashes aren't really visible, even though I have good resolution on the camera. So that's a nice thing about actually, let me get that down, about using the computer or a tablet to paint from. You just have to make your screen time out so that you have time to paint. You always have to be touching them. In settings, you can put it, I just set mine on 3 hours because I set it up before this 2-hour session, so that it shouldn't black out on me. But it's one really nice thing about technology, is the ability to really zoom in on things. And so if you use your pictures from your cell phone, if you're emailing them, or if somebody's emailing you pictures, be sure it's on the original size, because my cell phone really doesn't take great pictures. Some of the iPhones are incredible, but anyway, I usually use a camera. So anyway, at this stage, we're halfway through this painting. And so it's time to really analyze and sit back. And this is extremely important when you're doing a painting, is when your brain is alive, not when you're really tired in the evening, or depending on if you're a morning or an evening person, and I happen to be a morning person. I get up early, and while I'm eating breakfast, I put it like on the other side of the room, the painting. And I put the source photo too, because I am trying to do this realistically. Now, if you're more impressionistic or something, maybe this isn't as important, but you still want to get basic shapes right. And you'll notice even skilled artists, even when they have some very, very loose parts of the painting, it's amazing how they can depict things so perfectly, even with just a brush stroke, because they've learned exactly where to put that brush stroke. So when you look at a hand, it might just have, you know, a light streak here and line, or the little, you know, knuckle wrinkles and things, but they're perfect. And they'll do a little touch of color, and sometimes it'll be bright red, but it doesn't even look like blood. It's amazing. Experience and learning and talent can do. So just keep painting, you'll get there. Most of it's practice. Anyway, so what you need to do is you sit on the other side of the room and you look at each portion of your painting. And what I do is I make a list. You've seen this before if you've watched my videos. I just sat down. It's probably all backwards because when you do the selfie mode, it just makes everything backwards for some reason. So what it does though is it puts things down, because it's amazing how easy it is to forget. Oh, yeah, I was going to do that. Because you don't always see everything when you're busy painting. But when you're analyzing, you see a lot more. So I am going to just basically show you what I saw that I want to fix. You know, comparing these, you can see, you know, it's not there yet. Of course, it's not going to look exactly like the photograph, but there are some areas that are pretty close and some areas that aren't. That need to be fixed. One thing is I need to put in some background color. This is actually the underpainting of my canvas. I put on a basic burnt sienna tone, but I was going to paint it either green or blue for Sky. She's outside. She's getting a lot of light on her skin. And so I wanted to represent that. And after thinking about it, I chose that I wanted it blue like Sky, because there's a lot of reflected light in this painting, and a lot of the reflection light is blue. And it's always good to have something that, you know, common color. The whole painting go together with itself better, more cohesive. If you have some random splat purple, you know, it's like, what, huh? Why is that there? But if you have a little purple here, a little purple there, you know, it just, even if some of it's pretty random, it's still, it looks better because it just leaves, it has this cohesion that it makes. So anyway, I just looking at it starting from here and going through. And so the Sky, I noticed, even though it's on the other side, it's just something I hadn't done yet. The left eye. This eye is a lot better than this eye. I did this eye first. That was probably pressure. But it needs more light on the upper lid. I'm going to put this here so you can maybe see what I'm talking about on some of it. Can you see that? Yeah, the light is shining differently, and this is a high glossy photo, so it's going to look a lot lighter than this, even though they're really much closer than they look here, because, like I said, I have some photo lights in here that help me. It helps to have really good light when you paint, because then you can see what you're doing very well. So more light up here. The lid, mine's just, this lid is like, it just needs to be more light. It's actually a lot like this, and that's what I have it. So, you know, that's good reason I painted it. But sitting back, I noticed that it just looked too dark. And that's the advantage of sitting back. Sometimes things look bright up front, but when you look back up, they don't look bright anymore. So that's important, because people usually look at a painting from a distance. Okay, and so it needs to kind of fade up. You know, it's not it's got a kind of grade. The white of the eyes, actually both eyes, I painted them a light blue gray in the whites of the eyes, but they, from a distance, they look too white, too bright. So the skin under the eye, actually this is true on both eyes. This skin it's a little bit too bunched up, and even though it's very dark here and here, it's not quite as dark here. It looks very black here. Here it looks more like dark brown. Over here is my computer. And so the computer's more important. And I did show you this at the beginning. This is another picture. I'm not sure how it comes out on the computer. She has very dark skin. And in these photographs, there was a lot of afternoon light. It was in the afternoon. And that west, it was actually southwest sun was striking her skin. So she looks a lot lighter than she actually is. And I would prefer to make her more like she really is, because I think that dark brown skin is just really beautiful. So I want to be sure to capture that, but at the same time have a lot of contrast, so it's not just all one. I like contrast. So the skin under the eye needs to be softer, just a softer transition, and like I said, a little larger. A lot of the size of things and the perception of things is in the halftones and in the, where they fade from one value to another. And you have to be careful with that, because one of the things is this lower line is not a line. I have it pretty much a line here because I just kind of plopped it in. But especially this sides of both eyes. I just told you I was going to go this way, and then I start talking about this eye. But there are a lot of the problems on one eye and problems on the other eye. So the skin under the eye needs to be softer. And I have some of these lines down here. They need to be really lightened. They're too dark. So there needs to be more light up here. This is a little too prominent here. But she's smiling, and so there's light on this upper cheek, more than I'm showing here. Now the nose, I noticed sitting in the back of the room, I got this shadow in here, but you can see that it kind of sticks out here some more with light, and I've got a hint of it here, but the nose looks too straight. Here, it's not really showing straight. So I need to fix that. And on the other side too, there is a line here, but it's much softer than I'm showing. And this whole area is lighter. So, I need to make a lot of adjustments, but that is what we're doing today. We're making adjustments. We're checking shapes and then checking those. This is what makes a face, is the gradation from one value where it's dark and where it's light, and that defines every shape in the face. So you don't want something that's too sharply delineated, because the face is all, it's soft shapes. There are almost no hard lines in the face. The edge of the nostril, right here, even in the bottom of the nostril, it's a softer line in the bottom than the top, where you really can't see up there. Of course, well, even the pupil of the eye is not an absolute hard line. It's just a little soft. So, and of course, noses are, well, except for the nostrils, noses are all just shade and shadow. And mouths are really hard. They're probably harder than eyes. I've read the eyes are the hardest part, but I don't know, mouths are awfully hard. So anyway, tone down the white of the eye, skin tone under the eye, raise the light, okay. Nose, forehead. This area really needs a lot of work. Like I said, this whole side. And by the way, when I say left and right, you have to reverse it because the image is flopped. Like I said, it's mirror image. These little wrinkles here, they do come together more, but when you're at a distance, you really notice that there's this light coming up here, and most of the forehead wrinkles are up here, and they really fade off here. And she has this really interesting eyebrow. This is more like your expected eyebrow, more like, my eyebrows, which have makeup assistants because they're really, really, really light. But anyway, this one's much lighter. She doesn't have any makeup either on, but you can see that this is very interesting. It's character marks. There is a little dent here, And so her eyebrow is here, and it almost disappears here, and then it goes down here. And the lines of her forehead follow those lines. So, you know, if you, those are the things that make people interesting and unique. And that's really important to show, especially if you're doing it. So I want to capture all that and then just go through here. You know, this is much more midtones. This is the really dark, dark. See, I have all this dark all the way back over here. It doesn't stop. So I need to fix that. And, you know, just the light here, I thought I was doing it right, but I'm sitting back. It's that sitting back. You see things you don't see up close. So that needs to extend a little more. This dark area is really lighter, but I also don't want to make it this light because, again, I want to make her skin more like her, which is darker. I don't want her to look Caucasian. That would be terrible. Oh. Anyway, so where are we? Eyes. Over eyelids. I think basically I covered what I need to just check. I need to check this lid shape here because I wasn't sure from where I was sitting. But your eyelid is highest. Your pupil of your eye actually bulges out just a little bit from your eyeball itself. And so when the lid goes over that, there's a real subtle kind of mountain, a little hill. So it's going up and then it goes up just a little bit where it runs over the actual pupil, the iris and everything. So I don't want that in the wrong spot. So I just need to check that because I couldn't quite tell whether I had it right. Da, da, da. Under eye, I talked about this. It's not quite right. Broaden upper cheek light. Talked about that. Her hair needs to, well, I don't even have it all the way in here. You can see the canvas right here. But I think it needs to curve out just a little more. And one thing you can't compare apples to apples on this is this, well, it's really a board, not a canvas, but it's actually longer than my picture. And so there is going to be a little more sky, but I need to, you know, if you cut this off about a 1/4 inch, I'd look a little closer. The important thing is to get her skull right because, you know, hair can go anywhere. And it's, you know, it's not tied on your skull, although it's not real puffy either. But I want to be sure to get some shine up there too, because it is. So, now one thing in our transitions, this is important when you have a transition from dark to light. That transition, like right here, there's an area here where the shadow moves into the light, and that's called the penumbra. And this, I haven't really, this is one of those things that it's hard to see, but the color is a little more intense, a little more saturated right at that penumbra transition. And so and it's a soft transition depending on how sharp the edge is that you're dealing with, because, you know, if it's an edge that goes like that, it's soft edge, and then the transition is going to be very gradual. But if it's a very sharp edge, you know, like my knuckles here or something, it's going to be a lot sharper edge, which makes sense. And then the transition is very, very fast. And that's one of the problems here. Like, this is not soft enough anywhere near. And so it makes it look like there's a corner or an edge there, which is not there. So I looked up the Latin root of penumbra, and it comes from almost or nearly. So it's nearly in the light, or, you know, it's that transition. So, okay, so that's our summary. This is the goals for today. And I recommend doing this to everybody because you can just really focus on what you're doing. So I have my palette set up. Quick review for anybody that doesn't, that puts their paint on their palette in random ways. It doesn't matter whether you do it like this. I have mine in order that makes sense to me. I group similar colors with warms and cools, warm and cool red, warm and cool blue, warm and cool green, although I only put one green here because there's not a lot of green in this painting. But I start with my black and then move through the earth tones to the reds, to the yellow, the lighter earth tones, the yellows, the reds, the blues, and the greens, and have my white in the middle with a medium. It doesn't really matter, just make it make sense to you and then do it the same way every time. And so some of these colors look an awful lot alike when they're all clumped together on the palette. Like look at these blues. They're kind of shining in the light, so you can kind of see some difference. The reds, you can really see a difference. See these? This is I just stuck my finger in my white. Real smart, Roxy. I have alizarin crimson and cadmium red light, but I know that that's ultramarine without even having to think, because I know those are my blues, and I always put ultramarine here and then Prussian blue here. And so I don't have to say, is that? Now, there are two really close colors is your umbers, your burnt umber and your raw umber. So if they're always in the same spot, you don't have to think, you don't have to guess, you know exactly where it is. So you can just grab a little bit of it, mix it, and do what you want. So just be consistent. Think about it, what makes sense to you. Okay, to paint, I'm going to do just like I analyzed, start here and go this direction. We'll see how far we get. So actually, I want to put a little bit of really black here. I put in a little bit of gray here, and it actually looks blue, which is pretty. So I want, what brush do I want? I think I'm going to just use a real kind of medium brush. This isn't a very big one, but we're doing a lot of touch-ups and details. It's a Monarch number 2. It's pretty new, so it's not all fuzzed out. It looks like that. See, it's got an edge like that, and then it's lighter here. It's, like I said, it's not real big, but it's not real small. And some areas I'll probably want to go to a bigger brush, because these broad areas really want a bigger brush. But this is a small area, so I want to. So I'm going to just really get some really dark here. And I want to keep it kind of dabby, like dab, dab, dab. Because, you know, her hair is like kinky. And so dabbiness, it's not all like silky, it's like curly. And there's sky reflected here. So I'm going to add a little bit of blue to her, a little bit of gray hair here. It's really pretty interesting. It's actually much bluer in that picture. In there, it's more natural. So I want to keep it low key. Sure, she would prefer me to keep the gray hair low key. Probably don't know. It's a very small little area. I want it to look natural. And it kind of fades off. Now, hairlines are a little tricky because they're usually, they're not sharp. And if you make them look too sharp, it can look like a wig. Although I've actually known people that such thick hair that it looked like they were wearing a wig at their hairline, even like, oh, it was thick. That's not the case here. Now, a lot of time when I'm not even planning on going to the other side of the painting, I'll just pick up something there because the paint's right there on my brush. And you know, one thing I forgot not to do is careful. I don't know if you remember me saying that, especially if you're doing dark areas, you need to put some medium. Oh no, can you see that? I don't know if you can see that. It just brings out the blacks, but I certainly don't want to put medium where I just put fresh paint, but especially the black areas. It blackens them up like they were fresh paint. And fresh paint is blacker. but I can't do it anywhere where I just put paint, which is why you're supposed to do it before you start. So I a little spot and gave her a little sparkle there. I didn't mean to. She actually has a small bump there. And like I've said, you know, even things that some people, if you leave them out, sometimes it just doesn't look like it. So you have to be careful. Okay. Now, it looks really black up here, but I'm going to make black instead of using black because then I can control it so it's super dark brown. Like I told you before, to do that, you take raw umber and I know it's burnt umber. I was just mixing my paint and it was a little white in it. Sometimes that just spoils the color, mix it. I didn't want white. It makes it like cloudy instead of clear. Right? If you have any white at all. And sometimes you just, well, it doesn't matter, but sometimes you just don't want it. But if you're making black with burnt umber and ultramarine blue, the beauty of it is that you can make it browner, like a really dark brown or a really dark cold blue, and the brown is warm and the blue is cold. But I know that her skin is not blue, even though some of the reflections might be blue. This is a dark area. And so I want to make it very, very dark brown. It actually looks black, but photographs exaggerate dark and light. And so if you were really looking at her, you would see dark brown. So just trying to check out the computer image since it's more accurate. Now, as I get farther away from this edge of her face, I'm and less blue because I want it to gradually get to be a lighter brown. And that's kind of edge right there. And what's nice is that since we already have the basic shapes in, you can really focus on the edges. I mean, you know, all the different intonations of value. This area here, really interesting. Actually, she's a small little wrinkle there. She almost missed. Probably needs to be low, very subtle. Yeah. What I'm doing is looking for a soft sable brush because I want to keep my edges very soft. She's actually got all kinds of tiny, tiny little hairs here. But a dry, soft brush can just help blend the edges. This falls off very sharply. This falls off sharply. This is actually turns very flat here. And like I said, she's got just a little bit of a wrinkle in here. Barely showing, but I'm having trouble even getting it to show, but I want it so subtle because I didn't even notice it before, which means it's pretty subtle. When you reuse a blender brush, you have to be really careful because you really want virtually no paint on it. Now it's too prominent, so I'm just gonna kind of disappear. And then her eyebrows, very dark. Put it on and take it. It's all part of that expression. I think I'm running into a little more of a surprise kind of wrinkle up there at the top. Thinking of not framing these, but putting either a support just behind the painting, so I can put a hanger on there and give it, make it float on the wall. But I'm quite undecided about that. I might want to just build up the edge to make it thicker. Side. When you do a painting, it's a good idea to think about how it's going to be framed, because it does influence, like whether you're going to paint the edges, or whether, if you use irregular sizes, if you cut your own boards, they often are irregular sizes, and then you're not going to be able to walk down Michael's and pick up a stock frame. So you either have to have a custom frame, or you need to, use it generically. Either do a size that's a generic size, like 11 by 4, 8 by 10, 24 by 36. Oh, I should check for messages. Who is watching? It's under my rubber band. Oh, Lena Sinex is watching. I'm not sure she wants to be brought in on. Probably. Okay, so I'm just trying to establish the eyebrow a little bit. Actually curves down. Really focused on the shape here. It's soft and it's actually got a lot of blue in it. Now the sky is more of the Prussian blue rather than the ultramarine. I want to keep her eyebrows soft. Again, I'm getting reflection from the sky. And then you can just measure down. This one is coming down about right there, so that's about a little bit stop it. And it's all very soft. It's a little hard to see. And it's got some shine in it. So I'm gonna soften it up with my blender. Someone when I covered when I was doing the cat, if you see some point that you made that the strokes are too thick, you can get your fingernail and put it under a little bit of your paper towel. Those kind of got wide, but I want a little more eyebrow than that. I'm trying to do this very soft and gentle because I don't want her to have eyebrow pencil. I just want it to be natural. And there's a little like white reflection, but if I were to put that on right now, it would just blend. And I don't want it to just blend, so I'm going to leave it off. But there is a shadow. It's brown. I got too much blue in the brush, so I'm going to get. There's a little shadow coming down from above here. It's a little. Can't see, but I think it's like one of these. It's not like a furrowed brow because it's more of a happiness. It's a raised eyebrow, like those wrinkles you can see. See my wrinkles? Ah, those are interesting. When I was a little kid, I used to make faces in front of the mirror, and children have such soft and pliable faces with a lot of fat under their skin, subcutaneous fat. It's really hard to get a lot of the expressions that you can get when you're older, like make wrinkles and stuff. They're very expressive. So I used to make like a mad or angry face. Just making faces, but they just never came out as well when I was really young. Everybody should spend some worthwhile time making faces in the mirror. entertaining pastime. Plus, you learn a lot about expression. There's a little bit of a wrinkle there. Now, wrinkles, you have to be careful not to just draw a dark line because they're really mostly not a dark line. And you can see this better than my computer. What it is there's a little bit of darker skin on one side, and then there's light on the other. And it's not like just a dark line. There are areas like here is a little darker, which I was trying to get here. But just an area. But it's just not sure what it is. But some of those, some of the wrinkles are just, you can just, add a little light or something. But what you have to be very careful about is not over accentuating, because that's the tendency. You begin to get very focused, and it's easy to over. So just interesting. Let's see if I can just add a little bit. This one is going down this way, so going down up here, you get just a little bit of trying to get just an impression of a line. And I'm going to try to put I don't want to use this brush. When you have a good dark on your brush or something, sometimes I just tweak it lighter and darker and lighter and darker. But right now, I'm just going to go to a different brush because I want to maintain the clarity of the dark brush without adding that white that can make it cloudy. And I really want a good brush for the that's not all closed out, because I just want to make a little bit of a line. I'm trying to find a kind of a brush with a good edge. You have 1,000 brushes, not good. Maybe I'll try one of the small ones. These are little detail brushes. I'll just take a little bit of white that's watered down with some brown. Got a little bit of burnt. Because it would be real easy for it to stand out real light. But there's just a little bit of light. And it looks pretty darn light in the picture, but I'm afraid and this brush isn't actually looking like I want it to. That's why I keep buying new brushes, especially the small ones. I'm just trying to give a little hint of the light that's shining on the other side of this wrinkle. So it really is there. But I don't want it too evident. So I'm going to soften it a little. Try not to make it click on. And one of the nice things about oil paint, it's really good if I go and look at it later this evening and it looks too prominent. And just wipe it out because it's going to stay damp for a while. It's just wonderful. So right now, it looks kind of like a seam in her face. It actually kind of fades out in the middle. I'm going to just blur it a little more there. Well, we'll see. Sometimes if you just have one, it doesn't look right. And then as you add more detail in the painting, things flush out and they look more cohesive. There is another one that's reflecting even more light about right here. In fact, you can barely see the dark side of it. It's mostly light. It's also not straight. Just a little bit going this way. Now, I'm taking a risk here because I really haven't gone over the skin underneath. And I might have to just erase all this, but I'm on a roll. So maybe that will survive. Maybe it'll survive me and maybe it won't. This is way too dark. I'm not that side of that now. Okay, what I want to do, it seemed to me this, I didn't even notice. I'm going to step back and look at that area because I think it's pretty close. It's this area that needs to lighten. What needs to darken? I've got all this dark paint on my brush. I think most things need to lighten, not darken. There's an area right here that's really dark. I just have dark paint on my painting, on my brush, so I'm kind of looking for dark things. I'll have that nice dark. So you start on one side and go to the other, but sometimes you just don't even follow it. Oh well, I want to do this now. I have this paint on my brush. A lot of this area is going to have to lighten. Okay, let's lighten this paint. Okay, so I think I'm going to add some raw sienna because I want to lighten it. I prefer not to use white to lighten it. I might need to. Let's see what I'm getting here. Sometimes the paint looks a little different on your crown. I think I'm going to add some white. It just need to do that. I'm looking at this area here on there. It's actually a different color on each one. Well, this is actually shaped kind of like a big U. But it's subtle. You know, it's lighter here, it's lightest here, and then everything else is in between. But this is like too light looking. One thing you can do too, if you want to just tweak your colors, just wipe off the paint on your paper towel instead of getting it all wet with the paint there. I think I need some raw and burnt umber mixed, and not umber, sienna mixed together. Sometimes you need to kind of poke at your paint. Well, let's try a little of this and a little of that, and maybe a little of that, and then you can put it on here and see what it turns out like. Because like I said, it sometimes helps to have a dark palette, but sometimes it just looks a little different when you put it on the painting. Because of all the adjacent colors influence the perception of the one you just drawn. I've seen in art books, if you put a black circle in a white background and a white circle in a black background, the perception is quite different, even if they're the same color circles. So I know that needs blending. Put one on the roll. Check my shade. My shade was pretty good. Goes down there a little bit. And then this light, it's actually a soft line there, but there's a lot of blue light on that eyelid. And then the light part of the eyelid just vanishes down behind. And this goes back into the depth of her eyes. This kind of goes up there. And then there's a lot of shininess at the very top along here. A lot of like blue white. I need a better brush. It's just some, what it is the moisture around her eyes catching in the sun. And I'm adding just a touch of the Prussian blue because the sky is much closer to Prussian blue than ultramarine, which is almost more purplish. Sometimes I actually get it. And sometimes it's just a mix. It's really amazing. If you start looking at the sky, it's not always one color. It's all these different colors. And I've seen skies transition from just a dark blue to closer to the horizon line, like this really bright, like phthalo blue, totally different blue. It's a lot of reflection here. A lot of this starts kind of right under her iris. It's just reflecting light. But it's not like a line. It's like, because of her skin is textured, it kind of is a dabby, blotchy, kind of irregular shape. And then there's a little bit more under here, picking up the light. And that's all dabby in there. It goes toward the corner. And that's what this actually is, just the same. It's more solid, but it's still dabby because of the texture of her skin. So if I do it at the same time, I'll get the kind of matching brightness. It's thickest right in here. And then it comes down even in a very thin line down there. Here it's getting, it's like not quite the same. Some of this almost little lines. I need the direction of the hairs of the brush in the right way. I'm gonna put almost I think, at the brightest. It's pretty much over the eyeball. I mean the pupil. It sticks out more. She's actually got a down here. It's almost a little dotty for that too. I'm full of them. Then I'll blend it. And over here, you can see there's a really light spot right there. Sure, that's exactly the right spot. This brush isn't very good for making that shape. So you want to check your blender. For picking up other colors, you can wipe it on your paper towel. See whether you're coming up with color. This is all kind of blended in here, so I'm just going to go ahead and blend it because I don't want this like spot. But it gets pretty light. And this is all a little bit blended, so I'm just going to dab. A dab is kind of like this, and it can be very useful in painting. It doesn't make like a heavy thick line or anything. Kind of like massages the paint up. So let's leave it at that. This whole area needs blending. I know you're looking at it going, yeah, doesn't work. And it kind of fades off in this direction. Get that paint spread. And the nice thing about oils is still got the ability, I can still move this paint around, even though I just didn't just put it on. And that's nice. Now like this shape in here isn't quite. Let's see. To add a little, this kind of goes down more. This is too much extended there. And it's more dark. A new dark brush because I put light on. It's really dark. Checking my other. This is just pure Penumbra. Might be a little dark. But I can see here there's really a very dark line coming down, and it's ending up kind of skirting this area. So it's kind of like that. When it goes all the way up to her eyebrow, But rather than going, I don't want her eyebrow mixed in with her skin. I want her skin blending up into her eyebrow. That's why I'm not going down with my strokes as much as up. That's that transition there. And then there's some up here. I'm going to come down there. Again, I'm checking shapes, and going over and over the shapes. Sure, trying to get them right. Sometimes you see something that you didn't see. And I'm referring back and forth between my two pictures. This one's closer, so it's really convenient, but the other one I think is more accurate. To be shorter. A lot of this shape here, this lighter shape, has a whole lot to do with the expression of this eye, because what it's doing is it's pushing her eyebrow up, which is all part of this expression. She's just not looking at you with a smile, you know. She's looking at you with a smile. And it makes a big difference. That's why those are up there. That's why they're so important. And even it's a little darker here. The whole thing is pulling that eyebrow up. And all becomes part of this smile. I'm spending a lot of time on this area, but you know, it's worth it. Get it right. That's the idea. Worth the time spent. And then it really is getting dark down. Okay. And sometimes you just want to blend it a little bit to soften what you've done, because it's easy to over-exaggerate. But sometimes you really can't tell till you finish the whole thing. What you don't want to do is put something in and then just gray it right out. It's easy to do. Too much blending. Got to that now. This wants to be a little soft here. And now her eyelashes are going to come up here. They actually come up and they will join these two things together. There's too much darker. You can see it's getting lighter there, so I need to cut back on that super dark. I'll mix a little Penumbra with some of my siennas here to bring up the lightness a little bit. But it's just this area in here, because you can see this really dark spot ends about, it's just beyond the edge, about right there. And then it's lighter, but it's still dark brown. And this actually needs to come out with my lighter. Let me show you how a lot of artists do it. A lot of artists will hold their palette like that. That's what those cutouts are for. And the reason brushes are shaped the way they are, or they're fatter here, narrow, is so that you can hold them all like this. It's a little tricky holding your palette, holding your brushes, holding your mole stick. Wait a minute, I need another hand. But sometimes you can hold your mole stick here. And it's nice to have everything right, available, that you even having to turn around or anything. I'm just trying to, as long as you don't stick these in your painting. The way a lot of people paint. It's a very convenient way to paint, unless you have to refill your paint on your palette. And of course, you have to put everything down. I'm trying to just lighten up, get that dark. I want the dark. And I wanted a little more bulge in this eyelid. I can see this just a little bit more bulgy right in here. It's just real subtle. Faces are full of tiny subtleties. Get them wrong, goes off. Often can really throw off. I'm getting too much paint on here. I use so many brushes. I'm just getting a lot of dark paint. I don't want the dark paint. I think it might be right because I've got paint all over the place. I just want to soften that. Okay. I want to get a bigger brush for part of this. In this area, it really needs to be darker. Go back to my blue black. Because this part coming down, we just lightened up this area. And then this comes down, got that pretty close. Comes down and then goes down here. But this area needs to be enlarged and softened. And this is really very well defined in her face, this shape right here. But this comes sliding off here and then goes really angling down rather sharply right there. And that's picking up that cheek. And we'll have to add some light. And this is right. Okay, so I need some liner, but I really like this brush. See the size of it? It's a bristle brush, so it stands up better, and it just, because it's broader, it'll give a smoother area. So back to for my lighter areas, I'm using a lot of the raw sienna right here. Now the burnt sienna is redder, and I'm cautious with red because although she has this chocolatey skin that has a lot of red in it, at the same time I know my printer has too much red, and so it'd be easy for me to put too much red in here. And this raw sienna is much better. I think that's a little more curved. A little more. Burnt sienna is the dark, is oranger, it's redder. And of course and this is her cheek here. But some of this is quite light coming in going that way. If I add some light, if I'm going to totally freak out. It's almost a little, almost a little cadmium red light. It's really red, but even though she's black, her cheeks are still got pink in them. And that's my neighbor's dog. Area, I know it needs to be softer. And there's some real mixtures of everything. But all of this almost has a white reflection to it as the light shines. But it's like black there. I don't overdo it. I think I'm coming down. There's going to be some blacks in here too. There's some blues. This is all much softer. And it gets very black. Blender. This is a really fat blender. Let's see if it'll do some in here. Maybe too soft. It's a definite line there, but then it blends off. There's a blackness within, but it all diffuses in here. And then that's a little dark area around her nostril. I want to keep that kind of even there. But this has a darker edge, but it's that penumbra where it transitions from the dark into light. So trying to capture that. And this area here is almost a black, but then it's kind of, it's difficult when you have dark and light together. I always think of pine trees in the distance where, because they're in the distance and you have all the moisture in the air and they become lighter. And at the same time, they're very, very dark green. So how do you paint something lighter that's darker? It's a lot of time thinking about this. Driving down the road, looking at the trees in the distance. They're not light, but they have this white film over them, over something very dark. So I figured out the way to do that actually is to paint them dark, and when it dries, go back and put a wash of like light gray. And that gives them that wash of moisture. What it is, it's moisture in there. Now I need to cut down on that black there, but there's also some really very dark coming down here, and then it's picking up the reflected light here, and it really kind of ends there. And then this is all kind of light. That again. Sometimes when you lay the paint on, you have to exaggerate it because it's going to blend in. It's going to blend in with what's already there. So you might have to lay it on lighter if it's darker underneath, and you'll end up getting the mixture. And there's this sparkly white on there. Some of that we might have to glaze afterwards, because that way you get that layer instead of having it just blend together. If you do it wet on wet, sometimes it just all blends together and it's not. Let's see. What I'm trying to do is get this area. This brown needs to come down more, and it's fairly light, but I don't want it to be brown with a glaze of white. I want it to be more. It's actually deeper a little bit. And there's a line in there, and it kind of breaks up. I think some of that broken upness is kind of got obliterated. This is just not something that goes fast. I suppose if you do it enough times. Yeah, I told you I was going to do a whole bunch of eyes, and then maybe I'll do it enough times so it'll go really fast. This is where that transition takes place. The penumbra. But there's also some light. It's a little bit. Oh, the funny thing is all this light here. It's like shiny on her pores. It even goes down here. Speckle it in, and then I can. Some of these might have to come in and finishing touches. What you do is you put it in the light and the dark, and you blend it, and then next week we'll go in and look for areas that need to be popped out a little or really sunk in a little, and get the details like eyelashes and a little shine in the eyes and all those little things. I need to fix that eyeball. Okay. So let's see what we have here. I'm going to try to blend it. That is, you know, your brush is a little too big when everything starts going in the wrong spot. There is some really pink in there, I see. But I don't want to miss. But it's more of a orange pink. So I don't want to use the alizarin is a very rosy pink, and cadmium red light is much of a orangey. And I'm seeing a lot of orangey in there. Eyes have a lot of red around them, so you don't want to miss that. And I can see there's a lot more red in here. A lot of it's really washed over in the dark, but there's a lot of red in that tear duct shadow, and a lot of red over here. There's some pretty red. And even on her eyeball, it's like a little bit of bloodshot. It's actually got a little bloodshot in here too. Oh, that doesn't. It's more of a grayer red, or I think my red has gotten almost peachy. I'll put it over here and use a little peachy here. Let's see what it is. I need to blend this one. But I kind of like those separate colors too. They add a little life. You just don't want everything all blended out. And this really needs to blend it. It's that. Everything kind of mushes together here. That really sharp line starts partially over here. Oops. Hello. And then we've got this. There's a little bowl of light in here. This is really a rather tricky area because of the textures, a lot of texture going on. And there's a lot of transition from very, very, very dark to very light. And it's just a rather tricky area. Get all those transitions. Transitioning correctly. It's got the color in it, but it's also very, very dark. And then there's this eyeball actually comes down. This sticks out beyond all this light stuff here. And this is all going to be covered with eyelashes, so it looks a little bit different now. I think it's a little too rounded. In the shape. And it's very good. So, let's settle. The shadow is very blue-gray. The eyeball, actually, she's got dark eyes, but it's like there's a, what's that look on the computer? I'm looking because it looks too blue here, and I think it's the print. She's got a combination. Actually, this area that looks so gray and blue-gray here on this one, it looks more of a brown gray. So let's go for some brown gray. That's just. We might not get through this whole face tonight because I'm spending a lot of time over on this side. I said this closer than the other side, but my point is, if you want to get it right, it's worth spending the time on. Because if you go, well, you know, this is taking too long, so I'm just going to put this in here and then come back to it later. Sometimes you have to do that, but if you can, you know, as you look at it, you see more and more, and you see more kind of, oh, that really goes like that, doesn't it? Feeling. And so you can just really get into that whole area. And that's the only way you're going to really get it right, unless you, like I said, you have decades of experience, then it goes faster. And, if you know the person, it goes faster. I can paint my husband faster than anybody. I mean, than anybody, than painting anybody else, because I've been living with him for like a very long time. 48 years. I was married when I was a baby. So anyway, where was I? I was trying to get that color, which is actually a mystery color. Blend some things together. Surprise! Come up with the right color. Sometimes you just have to try stuff. Sometimes it ends up correct. But all of this eye was just too light. The white of the ice is not white. That's the lesson for today. White of the ice is not. This is actually quite dark shadow. Dark enough. But this area here is the lightest area. Everything else is darker. Go and reinforce that later, but you have to see. Some things you don't want to get perfect, because then when you paint other things, all of a sudden you realize that everything relates to everything. And so you might think you're doing it right, but it doesn't look right. But then when you get other things all around it in, and they're right, then all of a sudden it looks. And I think this actually goes a little. Decided to go with that beige. We were selling our house last year. That was the fashionable color, was beige. Gray and beige mixed together. Really very fashionable for exterior paint last year. No idea this year. I don't care this year. I already bought my nose. Already painted the old house. Beige. So it would sell. Dark, and red. Oh, it's nice and soft edge. You can't see this real well, but I'm just convinced that if she were here, you'd be able to see that better. It wouldn't just fade into darkness, that underside. It's still going to be dark, but not black. And then we really do have the little edge of that lower lid. It's a little darker. Puddle. Dark light, dark light, dark light. One thing I find is right next to the eyeball, it's just a little bit. One thing you want to do is never forget that the eyeball itself is round. And so the shadows around the eyeball. That probably needs to be darker. It's really dark. And actually, that little corner is really dark too. Right in here. It's not dark enough. I still want it to be light enough to look like the white of the eyes, but it's really in shadow. So we have some eyelash shadow here. And I have gray, blue, brown. all in here. It's very pronounced. It's not dark enough because I'm putting a darker color. It looks like it should be right, but it's on the, I painted the white underneath, so it's not coming out. It's coming out lighter than I'm putting it in, if that makes sense. And she actually has a little bit of bloodshotness in that eye too. It's still darker over. I don't want to totally lose the white of the eye. It's really dark. How's that doing? I want to lighten just a little bit of the whitest part, right in. That's going to be lighter now. Right. This defines the shape. And that shape is really important. That still needs to be a soft pitch. And if I want to go back later and fill in some of those blue blood vessels, I can, but then I can blend them too. I think this needs to be maybe a little darker. I'm spending all the time on this side. I have to speed up. But basically, the other side is going to be very similar because it's just the other eye. It's just that, you know, same concept. It's just going to be, you know, they'll be in a little bit different places. That's all. And knowing, you know, like in this really dark part, it's really dark, and I've got a dark paint in there, but I'm still going through and putting a little light in it because I know that this is really pink. That corner of the eye is really pink. And just because it's in shadow doesn't mean it's not pink. It gets really dark and you're very kind of peachy dark. It's not red blood red, but some of it's pretty red. So back to my peachy brush. Now this area really, this area has an awful lot of light on it. It has a little bit more of a slope right down here. It's almost a V. And then it comes up. And it really is probably good to do a little scumbling here. Scumbling, it really works best when it's dry. So I might have to go through and scumble a little bit. And what scumbling is when you get a dry brush with dry paint and you kind of drag it across the paint. It's a little harder. This is a board, which is smoother. It's easier with canvas because it's bumpy. But what you want to do is leave a kind of light trail of disconnected color. So it's a kind of like bumpy textured, but not blended at all. And because right here, what I'm seeing is a lot of little tiny dots of light that a very light scumbling might work just best there. But the nice thing about doing experimental things or things that you think should work on a dry, after the painting's dried, is that you can always wipe it off if it doesn't work out. And this area comes up, but it's much narrower. Because I think that dark is a darker blue. It's not blue, it's darker. It's my darker part. Got light on it. This is a great brush, but I don't think it requires a lot of control in this area. What I'm trying to do is get this sweeping down piece of light that goes down here. You can see there. See how it's really much narrow. And so I want to This shadow is a little bit too dark anyway. And I want to, it really is dark at the top, but it blends down. So I'm going to see if I can just make this little swoop. Should have cut it in a little on this side. Swoop it a little more because it's very narrow up here. I'm going to minimize it a little. And then it comes down. Sweeping down here. It's soft, shadowy. A lot of these shadows look awfully black, and I'm just not convinced that. Again, like the camera exaggerates sometimes those blacks. And the whites. Really dark. And I think this might come in. Let's see. There's about the deepest part, which is about here. That might come in just a little bit more. And here. Quite an angle here. It comes out and just spreads into lightness. But there's just a little area really dark here. And really dark here. And then really dark here. And there's a little light in between. So it comes dark here. But there's just a little bit lighter. I don't want to lose that. But it's really, you barely see it. It's right in between here. It's very subtle. Right in there, you can see it. You barely see it there. I blend it in so it's just real subtle. And then there's this dark light, and then it gets lighter again. And here, which you can barely see also. And then it gets dark again. But these are also subtle. You could just barely see these changes. But there's another little line coming down like right there that you can barely see. And that connects, yeah. This connects. And so other things. I was sitting across the room, this whole area looked way too dark, but it's just all these little patterns of dark and light. And that needs to be blended because it's just a little speck of light. All this needs to be blended out. Which their old blending brush does a great job. You know that. So I don't want to lose that darker streak, but I also don't want it. You know, it was so subtle. Didn't even see it at first. But all of this kind of blends out up here. Above her eyebrow. Almost connects there. And this is just subtle, subtle, subtle. But a little more blending. Yeah. Oh, and get a little bit lighter. There's a really light spot right there. Added a little of sienna in here. Nice thing about sienna is it's a very warm, friendly color. And then there's actually a little bit of light in there. Not that much, but and then let's see. Just about up here, there's actually, I think this is beginning to transition into the ball of her nose, just a little right there. But it all needs to be subtle, subtle, subtle. Barely there. A little bit, just like this. It's barely there. I need to minimize that. Sometimes you can put it on and then wipe it off, and just enough of it stays. that you get what you wanted without it being really much there at all. That can be very helpful. And the old paper towel. It gives her that kind of tiny bit of a I wouldn't say lump in her nose, but there is a change there a little bit. It's one of those things that you don't want too obvious, but it's there nevertheless. So I'm going to try to blend. And then this actually spreads out a little bit more here, but it also gets darker a little bit on that side. With that little darkness just right. There's a little bit of spread here. Just a little bit. It's just coming down and separating twins. But this goes over here, over there. I'm good at talking to myself. There's a little bit of shadow right there. A little bit. Very blue. Let me back up. That's a little too much. I think this is just a little bit too much. It's there, but it's just a little bit too obvious. So I'm trying to tone it down just a little with soft lines. This whole thing is pretty soft. Shadow. Does that look better? Yeah. Okay, so Brian Dodd is watching. Hi, Brian. How are you? I'm not sure when you came on because it doesn't say time, and I've been just busy blending and dabbing and oh, Dylan Toller is watching. He's under and Jason Redding. Oh, hi. Hi, guys. Dylan, you're hiding under my rubber band. It holds my phone. I have a little thing that pops up pictures. I'll show you what it is. You can rubber band this to an easel. It's just one of these little props that I always put my little squirrels. You can put a picture on there. And if you rubber band that to the little, I have a flat part on the top of the easel where my camera goes. And so that's rubber banded to that little platform. And then the phone, you can move the angle of the phone. You can rubber band the phone right up there. And it's cool, except for sometimes rubber band covers up one of your friends. Dylan. Yeah, you're really good at hiding. I was hiding under a rubber band. I didn't know you were that small. That's tiny, tiny. Okay. So, let's see, where are we? I got to back up a minute. Look at this. It's coming. I keep thinking I need more light right in this area. Can't catch that smile on her cheek. Oh, Dylan, I show you something. I'm starting one in the sun. This is one of Becca's paintings of cinnamon with George hiding under the chair. I've been working on it. And I just started one of just George's head, but I can't pick it up because I painted the background and I wrapped it around the edges. And it's like super wet paint. So I can't even, I have to just let it dry. But I'm going eye crazy and cat crazy with painting. Okay, so back to my neighbor here. The eyes will really brighten up when we put the light in. It makes all the difference. Like, look at these. show this last week. See how the eye, when you put the light in it, it all of a sudden gets all wet and juicy. So that's to come next week. Juicy eyes. Got the nose that I need to lighten. It just comes down much. This is also light because the light is just gleaming off her skin. So let's see, I want that. It's there, but it's not near as much there as I had it. And that goes all the way up here. And this wraps around here. I think what I really need to do is add more light. This is all, there's a lot of skin texture in here. And that's true with all of this in here. And it's like, the skin is just kind of stretched this way. And then it's like there's all these lines in it that are really hard to get. Because just they're very irregular here and there, everywhere. And then what you want to do actually is capture them without putting them all in, which is easier said than done. But I don't know if you can see that. See those lines, how they're all kind of, I see there's lights shining on my screen. You're going to make those go away. But there's all these little lines in here that are, the trick is to paint them. So you can see your eyelashes up here too. The trick is to be able to give the feeling that they're there. So you know they're there, but you don't necessarily have to paint every single pore and scrutinize every detail. You need to get the feeling of that texture. So that's what we're going to aim at in that area there. And this area needs a little depth on one side. That nostril, it has some deepness. Deepest part is the darkest part, and that actually it's very interesting of that shape on the lips. It's kind of like a whoa. And I'm running into my easel. But then it goes up from there. So get in your way for a minute. That looks a little better. A little bit hard edged. Here's my soft blender. This is a harder on this bottom side with that flange. That's what those things are called on your nose. Comes up and then it blends out into the face. I want to blend out this onto there. And there's, but like I said, it's not, it's light. It's not white. It's light. And it actually comes down here and it comes down here. It comes sweeping down here. And it comes around. It's comes way up here. It's not bad actually. And then there's actually a lot of light up here. This whole area. It's almost a flare light that comes down here. Texture of the skin is just So interesting. Skin gains so much texture as you get older, too. It's really interesting. A lot of things that happen to your body, even though you might not be classically attractive, but they're really interesting as you get older. I can like see through my skin, see all my veins and tendons and stuff. Yeah, anatomical model. See through me, a visible woman. I had a visible woman model as a kid. I loved models. My daddy would always buy me models because he thought it was cool. You like models too. He once bought me a visible engine, like a car engine. Oh man. The problem is it was plastic and not all the pieces fit together correctly, and it was supposed to actually be able to function. But if the pieces are plastic and they don't fit together correctly, it just doesn't really work out very well. I just never, I built a lot of models as a kid, but that one I could never get it to work, even with Daddy's help. It was just like engines aren't made to be plastic unless they have a lot better plastic than they did in the 60s. So, now this is kind of actually goes up more like that and then up like that and then down like that. I'll have to correct that. That's a nice little divot there. It's really interesting. And then it kind of falls off here. And then the start comes there. See, all of this is a nice color in here. Of course, I was rather expressive in my application of paint here, but it needs to be, you know, sculpted a little bit. But sometimes it's just easier to deal with it. You kind of lock it on, and then you can sculpt it down. This is a little brighter too. And if I end up making her whole skin tone too light, and then I look at it when it's, closer to being done, really, if it's dry, and I said this, at the start, I can put a wash over it, just a real light, thin layer of like burnt umber or something dark, and it'll take the whole thing and just darken the whole thing. If I get just too much light. Like I said, there was a lot of sunlight this day. She doesn't freak out when I show her this painting. People see beauty differently. Sometimes if it's yourself, you go, really? Even though everybody else goes, oh, that's it. I think my father was dying. She was in his painting because I was painting his favorite things. Of course, my mother was one. My father's very favorite. She's not a thing, but person. She says, I look like my Aunt Joy. You painted me like my Aunt Joy. Because, it's these things here. They're getting saggy. I said, Mama, you're not young anymore. Yeah, I guess so. She's in her 70s. Certainly younger then than she wasn't any spring chicken. It's like I'm not any spring chicken. So I like being retired so I can paint all day. I don't have to worry about an hourly wage. finishing that edition. Outs. Deadline. I still sometimes have deadlines on portrait commissions, but it's fine. I don't. I love doing it. Do it. You had one of those plastic V8. Was a V8 engine, Dylan? Did you have one of those things? Was it a V8? Mine was a V8. I drove a VW Bug with a 4-cylinder engine. I was trying to build a plastic V8. I remember driving uphill in Arizona in my Volkswagen Bug with the pedal to the floor, going 15 miles an hour. Those were the days. I think they make stronger engines in those new VW Bugs that don't look much like a VW Bug. That car a long time. The 61. Before they had gas gauges. No gas. Can you imagine getting a car with no gas gauge? There was a little lever on the floor when you ran out of gas. You just drive and you ran out of gas. You just flip this lever and it gave you an extra gallon to get to a gas station. My best friend, they had a special pencil and they had a place, I think it was on the car radio, where they keep track of the mileage so they know when they might be needing to get more gas. We finally had a gas gauge installed because it's really inconvenient not to know how much gas is in the car, especially if you have multiple drivers. And no air conditioning in Arizona. We eventually got that installed. We had seat belts put in, didn't come with seat belts. And I can't remember whether it came with a car radio. We went through, I guess the fourth time it blew its engine, we sold it. We were in the middle of the Mojave Desert. You don't drive. It's really hard on a air-cooled engine when, it's. Policeman told us in the summer it would get 200 degrees a foot off the road in the summer in the Mojave Desert. And you get an air-cooled engine in there and it doesn't work. There was a place right in the middle of the Mojave Desert, a little tiny town called Ludlow. This was in 1972. We blew our engine. Before we got there, we didn't know it was there. We all said prayers. Steve and I said prayers. That's all of us. These two guys, in 5 minutes, I mean, like nobody was on the road. Nobody inside. It's just this long road going for, it was 50 miles to Barstow and 70 miles to Needles. And the car blows its engine in the middle of the desert. So we prayed. And before long, these guys came up in this black car with smoke windows. Asked on a ride. Said a few more prayers, got into the car. And they took us to the next town, which was, like I said, it wasn't far away. Actually, it was there. They didn't work on Volkswagens, but they had a great dune buggy business. They bought our car for $25. We didn't have a credit card. We didn't have any money. We had $20. The policeman gave us $25 for the car, and we put it with our $20, and he drove us to Needles so we could catch a bus for $45 and get home to Tucson. 10 cents to call Steve's mother to pick us up at the bus stop. After that, we decided maybe we should get a credit card. They didn't take checks. If you were out of state, we were in California, all this is in California. They used to not take out of state checks. So that was one of our memorable adventures when we were newlyweds. This dark area really ends like right out there. So I'll need to lighten up there. And it's not super light, but it's definitely lighter now. So, down. All this needs to be blended. And in there. This really it's cut out. Like that. It's up. And then that comes down. A little of it comes over. But this really, really dark shape, it's about like that. And then I got all this very light shape above it. Comes down a little farther. This is super light here. It's like almost white. Because the there's a bride pushing up her eyebrow right there. And that comes down. This is all that bigger area. It comes up right here. And all this needs to be blended. There's some really, that penumbra is catching right on this edge. There's a like almost red there. This comes down more. It's down there. It's down there. And all of this is really light. Well, like I said, I don't want to make it too light because I want to turn Caucasian. This eyebrow disappears. Actually, your eyebrows almost disappeared. That eyebrow, go find an eyebrow. Of course, all this stuff needs to be like blended, but if you can get those shapes in there, then the blending's relatively easy. It's getting the shapes correct, and this I think is too far down. Dark area, and that's where all that feathery pimples are. And then this whole area needs to be a little lighter. You have that nice spray coming out there. And I'm running out of raw sienna. And this is very light there. I need a different brush for that. There it is. It's good, maybe. There's really a lot of light right here. That blue light, blue white light from the sky. And she's got a lot of these, it really is coming down. You've got all these lights coming here. And this kind of dabby textured finish. And it kind of dribbles off in this direction. And there's a whole lot of light up here. And there's just this soft little, I need to lighten up that line. And the eyelash is going to come right screening on through here. And all of this is very light. And these little skin stripes here from the light. And we kind of actually go up more like that. Got this edge coming up. And that's why that looked so harsh before, because there's really quite an edge there, but at the same time, it's kind of blended. And it's coming off here. Nice little, some smile lines there. Lady's a real sweetheart. Like that. And actually, when this comes down, it's all light in here. I'm not sure I got that little speck is more over here. And I am totally right now. So, you know, the clock. Oh, I've got the clock on. Oh, it says it's 9 o'clock. So I'm going to just have to, you know, go over this little. I might do a little bit of painting and adjusting before next session, but of course I still want to leave enough stuff to do in the next session. So same time, same place next week. We'll see you and we'll get this painting wrapped up. So have a wonderful week. We'll see you later.